A very good afternoon, students. So, after the talking about ecosystem, biotic and abiotic components, we are going to talk about today food chain. And one more thing I will take with you, that is food web. Two things we will discuss today in detail, that is food chain and food web, in a very simple language, in a very simple terms. If I have to tell you what is a chain is usually always a sequence, right? It is a sequence, that is what we call chain. That so same when we say food chain, it is a series of organism in which one organism eat another organism as food, and definitely for the energy also. So one organism when eat the another organism for the as a food, that series is known as, that sequence is known as a food chain. A very simple food chain I have written here, which is a grazing food chain, that is grass is eaten by deer and then lion eats deer, right? So this is a three step, just a very simple food chain. But in a proper technical language, if we have to define that what is a food chain, then how we can write this food chain? It is the sequence. You can very easily you can write down that it is a sequence of living organisms. That is what we said, that it is a sequence. It is a sequence of living organisms in a community, because communities को ज्वाइन करके आपका इकोसिस्टम बनता है. The sequence of living organisms in a community in which one organism eats, और या फिर आप लिख सकते हो consume, eats other organism to transfer food and energy, or simply food energy. To transfer food and energy is called a food chain. I don't think that any single word is difficult for you to write this technical definition. It is a sequence of living organisms in a particular area in which one organism eats other organism to transfer food energy, or food and energy is called as a food chain. Now food chain is always, please very careful about writing this, that food chain आप इसको reverse नहीं कर सकते हो. A food chain is unidirectional. We have just written a simple example of food chain: grass, then there was rabbit, and then there was lion. Now can you imagine that lion is eaten by a rabbit? Is it possible? No. Grass is always eaten by rabbit, rabbit is eaten by lion. So food chain is always unidirectional. Unidirectional means where transfer of energy, जो हम बोल रहे हैं कि एनर्जी इज ट्रांसफर्ड, ट्रांसफर ऑफ एनर्जी टेक्स प्लेस इन ओनली one direction. That is your 1 mark question, that why do you say that food chain is unidirectional? Because transfer of energy always happens only in the one direction. It is a simple process which depends on one statement: who eats whom, कौन किसको खाएगा, that is the food chain, right? So there is the basically you how the energy is transferred, that is like grass is transferring, from grass the energy is transferring to the deer, and then from deer it is transferring to the lion. Now this was the simple food chain. If I have to, there are usually, now when we talk about food chain, there are generally three types of food chain we talk about. One we already talk about, that is the grazing food chain, simple grazing food chain. And second food chain is detritus food chain. Detritus, in which detrivores they plays a role. Then third is parasitic food chain, right? This is the parasitic third food chain. In grazing food chain, we can now you are asked to write a three simple step food chain, in which you can easily mention this grass, rabbit and lion example, right? And if you are asked to write down the you have to write down the 5-step food chain, then how will you write it? 5-step food chain, especially in the grassland ecosystem, right? You have to write down 5-step food chain. How will you write down? Let's write down 4 or 5 steps food chain first, like grass. Then you can write down insects. Then there can be insects, they are then eaten by frog. Then who eats frog? Birds, they can eat frog. Yes, so this is a 4-step food chain. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if we have to write 5, grass, which is eaten by insects, insects which is eaten by frog, frog which is eaten by snake, snake which is eaten by eagle. So this is a 5-step food chain. So in this way you can make your own food chain depending on the consumers in your food chain. Then if you have to define food chain in a pond, or we can say food chain in a pond or a lake, then what you can write down? If first is the phytoplanktons, you know that algae is found in the river, right? Phytoplanktons, these are your algal plants. These are eaten by zooplanktons. Many of us sometime we don't get idea that what is a zooplankton. Zooplanktons, they are nothing, they are microscopic free floating animals, right, which you can easily found in a pond or a lake. So they eat algae, simple phytoplanktons. Then zooplanktons, they are eaten by small fish. And who eat these small fish? That is eaten by the big fishes, right? So here we can make our pond or the lake food chain. So in this way you can make your different food chains, food chain of 2 members, food chain of 3 members, then 4 and 5. This is the simple grazing food chain. Now second food chain we said, that is the detritus food chain. Detritus food chain. Now what is detritus? Definitely who is the main source here? That is the dead organic matter. Dead organic matter is the main energy source. So we are going to start with this food chain with the dead leaves. Dead leaves पे कौन act करेगा? Who act? Those are the consumers, which are known as the detritivores. These are the dead leaves eating, the eaters. Basically they can be your now bacteria, definitely they act on the dead leaves and dead organic matter. That can be fungi, that can be your protozoans. So these all are detritivores. Now who eat these? They are, if you have seen those small insects kind of wood louses, they eat these. And wood louses, they are eaten by the black bird. So this complete your detritus food chain, right? The last one is parasitic food chain. Now, what do you mean by parasitic food chain? Here, a host usually it begins with the host. It begins with the host and ends in a parasite, because parasite is dependent on the host. So we are going to start with the producer, then herbivores. They can be herbivores, and then we are going to finish on the parasite. Always remember that this parasitic food chain, you have to begin it with the host and ends in parasite, right? So this is not very much common, this parasitic food chain, but these grazing and detritus food chain, they are the most common food chain in the nature. This is about your food chain. What is the significance of food chain in our environment? They help in understanding the interactions, as well as the movement of toxic substances कैसे pass on करते हैं from one level to another. They help us to understanding that. The last thing which I'm going to take with you, that is about food web. What do you mean by food web? Now, simple sequential chains, they are known as food chains. Interconnected. Now we are going to connect our food chains. Interconnected food chains operating in an ecosystem, or you can say functional in an ecosystem, which form a network of relationship between various species, right? Which form a network of relationship between different species are called a food web. सो वेब का मतलब ही होता है नेटवर्क. जब आप बहुत सारी फूड चेन्स को कनेक्ट कर दो, इंटरकनेक्टेड फूड चेन्स ऑपरेटिंग इन एन इकोसिस्टम, when they form a network of relationship, that is called your food web. Suppose we are starting with the grass, right? Now grass is eaten by grasshopper also. Am I right? This is absolutely right. Grass is eaten by rabbit also. Now grass is eaten by seed eating bird also. That is right. But now this is a connection. That is not only a one chain. This grasshopper can be eaten by garden lizard also. Right. Now who can eat this grasshopper? Garden lizard can eat this grasshopper. Or grasshopper can be eaten by frog also. Now who can eat this rabbit? Rabbit can be eaten by this eagle. And then comes your seed eating bird, that can be eaten by snake also, or can be eaten by eagle also. Then snake can be eaten by eagle also, and frog can be eaten by eagle also. Then garden lizard can be eaten by eagle. So it is a network of relationship between different species. It is not a single sequential food chain. It is a network of food chain. Interconnected network of food chain operating in an ecosystem. They are known as your food web. Always remember, this is a interconnected network. It is a interconnected network of food chain that is called food web. तो confuse बिल्कुल नहीं होना है. Food chain is a sequence of living organism in which one organism simply eats the other, and here it is a interconnected network in which many relationship between the different species they can be studied. Interconnected network, that is called our food web, right? So the food web and food chain, please go through these two concept, and in the next we will talk about to another important points, that is the trophic levels and 10% law.